we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, hello, and goodbye, everybody. My name is John. As always, welcome to Karate Without Belts. And I'm joined always by the illustrious, the wonderful, the God of Thunder himself, Jeremy.
I don't know about, thanks for the introduction, but I don't know about all that. So we'll just go with
I
it.
don't know. I wonder where God of Thunder really came from. I mean, it's what a lot of people use to introduce people. I'm like, where did? All right, whatevs. So how the hell are you doing today, Jeremy? What's training been like recently?
Actually, I've gotten into going through some stuff finally. So what was interesting is my son started watching me. He goes, "We're not doing that." And I'm like, "Well, here, I'll start teaching you." He goes, "Okay." And then we started doing that, and then he got sick. So, hey, that's the way it goes. But, at least he's starting to kind of get a little more interested in different stuff than I'm doing as well.
That's awesome. That is an awesome thing to hear. Because with parents in martial arts, and especially martial artists who are also parents, you're always walking a fine line with wanting to teach your kid and then also understanding you're a parent, not the teacher.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be both of those things.
Yeah, you're both. Yeah, you end up being both. I mean, if in certain circumstances, and it's like, all right.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Anything particular that caught his eye, or what?
Really, I was just working on basic exercise number 3, and I wasn't just going through it, kind of like as I like to call it, Smurf karate. It's kind of like da 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 da. I'm not doing basics like that. I mean,
Okay.
that's kind of what I call it, because I'm watching people do that. It's like da 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 da. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I'm not doing ki eyes or anything like that. I mean, I'm just putting some intentionality into it and some speed. And he goes, "What is that? That's quick." I'm like, "It's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be quick." So
that actually, from based on our last conversation or last time we really went into it, which was about 3 weeks ago, I want to say.
Something like that. Yeah, I lost track of time.
Oh God, yeah. It's like I'm glad the RSS feed tells me like when last time we posted an episode. I'm like, okay, we need to get around to this sooner than later. What you were talking about like how you start out each day or each session with just these certain drills, no matter what you're doing, these are the ones we're doing. Everybody go listen back to the last episode. It's a little all over the place, but it's a good time. Like most of this podcast.
Yeah.
That idea, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna do that. And I just every training session I've done, I haven't been able to train every day, mainly because I just completed a half marathon and I was like, okay, I want my body to not burn out on me. So I'm gonna kind of take a rest. But leading up to that is almost every day I was doing that. And I was just like felt much better. Like felt much more in shape just from that. And it's weird to say that I always have to constantly remind myself, oh yeah, karate's the workout too. Like among all the other stuff, like it is. It can't be the only thing.
Yeah.
But it is, and it, depending upon like what you just said, like hey, if you're doing it with intent, you're doing it with the speed. Yeah, no, it does the job of everything else as well. That's what I've been up to, but I'm let the last week kind of recover. I had an MRI yesterday.
Ooh,
it was fun.
Yuck.
Well, no, it wasn't like going into a coffin. Like it was like just a giant circle.
Oh, yeah.
And like it was it didn't feel so claustrophobic. It felt like something was like falling on you, but it wasn't so claustrophobic. And because I had them check out my shoulder, and the doctor was like, "Yeah, you bruised a bone. Yeah, you also broke a bone. When did I break a bone? I don't know. Literally, apparently I broke my shoulder sometime in the last 20 years. It was either 2 months ago, 2 years ago, 20 years ago. No clue. But like,
can I at least take credit on that for whenever I hit you? Come on, man.
I mean, you got to get in line there and behind a few cars as well, because I don't know, man. I really want to find that video
Hey, wait a minute. That's the first time you've ever told me about this. So I'm just wanting to try to get in line for the credit on it, So it's just that's all I'm trying
Well,
to
this is the first time I knew about it because I had X-rays and stuff there, and I was like specifically about my shoulder. So I'm pretty sure it was within the last 10 years. Pretty sure. But
do.
yeah, I don't know. Apparently, I just broke my shoulder and just like walked it off.
You
I
know,
have no idea how that happened, but
rub some dirt on it, it'll be fine. Yeah, no, I got
yeah.
it. All right.
No, and well, apparently all I have is like a bruised bone, which
Thanks.
is like what's causing the pain. And he's like, no. The doctor's like, there's nothing you can really do, but you can still do anything. That makes sense. Like it's
Yeah.
not stopping. It's the pain that'll probably not be great, but it's not. There's nothing torn. That's the best news. Back on Bogu training, back on Mace. Hopefully, starting into the new year, we're gonna have some more content stuff about that if we're lucky. If we're lucky. But today, to kind of go from the caveman to the astronaut, as it were, uh, supposedly, we are going to be touching on what we were talking about last time as regards to kind of just bare basics and bare bones of stuff, and going into what leads us away from said thing. And it's what I've dubbed to be the cocaine nose candy of traditional martial arts.
Ouch. All right.
Do we want to stick with that title? I'm not entirely sure.
Here in Kansas City, they just finished up the big barbecue competition that's here, and so maybe we can go with meat candy.
Meat
So
candy?
meat candy. So,
That's what we okay.
so
We'll go on that. We'll go on that because I mean, like, there's a funny history with cocaine and martial arts.
yeah.
Back to your favorite era, the '80s.
Hey,
Uh,
hey.
John Vaught apparently for what is it? That's Street Fight. Yeah, Street Fighter Street Fighter. Apparently for that movie, there was like a significant part of the budget had literally gone into his cocaine addiction.
Well, and,
That's a
yeah,
great movie that we need to review sometime. But
I that piece I don't know, but I mean, if it was around the '80s, I mean, everybody was pretty much
yeah.
doing that. Anyway,
Anyway,
that's a
we're
whole
not
thing.
actually talking about any illicit substance or material. We are talking about, technique. And I mean this in the broadest sense possible. And I'm going to circle back and talk about what the mistranslation of that is. But we're going to get into what we have now taken it to mean. And what I mean by that is anything that is not caveman, anything that is not gross movement, anything that is not kick, punch, your almost sport karate, right? Where a lot of people think is self-defense, or is like advanced technique, or kyusho jutsu or torite jutsu or some sort of magic. I think is what people go after. And I think we've addressed this a little bit in the past, but I think it's the most important to how we address it now. And kind of where it started really taking off from and why it's kind of hurt things to this day. And I think one place we can start is kind of thinking of people thinking karate is incomplete.
Okay. Yeah. I can kind of see where people do make that misnomer. And I think it's it goes back to, what you're shown and what you're being taught. I think, the old adage like I'm the teacher, I'm going to show you a lot, but I'm not going to show you everything. And sometimes that everything gets to the point where they're not showing the deep understanding of what is available in karate. They just I think that's what's caused maybe some of the mystery or the misconception of it not being a complete art because I mean, if you're really training in a classical karate system, you're doing stuff like ground fighting. You're doing stuff like Muay Thai. You're doing stuff. I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff that's very similar to a lot of things out there. And those other things are branching off and taking from karate, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we may get into, I'm not going to
Differences.
get into examples and
Yeah.
stuff, but I mean, there are places where, I mean, if you understand what you're doing, you're using elbows, you're using shin kicks, you're using your knees, like a lot of these other things. So,
And this is where I gravitate back to like those old films of the guys training. Like, yeah, they're doing that.
yeah,
They're going hard. They're
yeah,
they're 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 not holding back on that.
yeah.
And I honestly don't think it was a racial thing. I don't think they were trying to hold that stuff back from that version of stuff from the Americans.
It-
What I think ends up happening is you get a lot of, because you're right exactly when people are holding back, but they're holding back in the wrong way. They're not holding back the techniques necessarily. They're holding back the instilling the attitude of practice and polish and getting the techniques right. And then you get into what we've talked a lot about is people needing to have a new thing, needing to have a new toy, needing to get the next thing.
the glitter syndrome.
The glitter syndrome. Oh, the glitter. And here's the thing. Off of that, this makes people look around and be like, where's the other glitter? What
Yes.
else is shiny out there? Ooh, that's shiny. And that's not to say it's not a bad thing to go experiment and work on that. We're going to
Yeah.
come back to that. I'm not saying that. However, this is what has allowed, for this idea to go to, like, I need to learn ground fighting from judo. I need to learn joint manipulation from Aikido. I need to learn weapons from Eskrima. I need to learn, ground fighting from Brazilian jiu or from jiu-jitsu, right?
Or
Or
even
wrestling.
wrestling or whatever. Yeah.
And that's not bad in itself. Cross training is
No,
not bad. I'm not saying that.
no.
But what has ended up happening more is that people, and this is kind of, I think, the pre-stage to all this was, oh, well, we do karate, and then we also do judo, and we also do aikido, and then we also do this, and we also do that. It's kind of like, and this, and also we have this. We have more than them over there,
Mhm.
right? And some of that is, like, I think, feels like more business. Some of it is just kind of attempting to glorify oneself through more stuff, but
Yeah.
more isn't always better, as we've kind of pointed to. I think this caused a real crisis, or like pretty. I think probably around like over like the after the end of the Bruce Lee time was people attempting to justify karate.
Mm, I would say that really came in more after MMA did.
Mm. Well, I think it came in stages. And kind of
No, maybe a little bit, but then I think you had the Karate Kid revolution,
yeah.
and I think really the whole, I don't know, the whole mentality of Karate Kid, everybody, that's what they're really wanting. That's what I saw.
Well,
I mean, me included. I'm not throwing
yeah.
this, but then again, you throw a little bit of Chuck Norris in there, a little bit of Steven Seagal badassery, it's just, you want a little bit in there. But, hey,
The man who may or may not be an actual CIA asset, and we'll probably never know.
well, I don't even want to get into that, but it, I,
It's a worthy investigation, but that's not what we're doing right now, unfortunately.
yeah, no.
Um, I understand. I see what you're saying from the kind of cultural perspective, but it's like also looking at, like, there's an issue with the insecurity of just doing one thing.
Yeah.
If you think about it that way, because if you can see people do like joint manipulation, like if you're just a regular, like, let's say Kyokushin guy, like back in the 80s, right, or
Yeah.
even like 90s, even today, right, and you
Yeah.
see people do like judo throws and like aikido flips,
Mhm.
right, and you got students who are like, hey, can you do that, and you're like, no.
Mm.
Doesn't make you that appealing, right?
Well, I mean,
So I think that led to a lot of insecurity. where you've got a lot of these guys who had kind of started with sport karate, and then they were looking for more. But what that more was had to come out in, one or two different ways, either cross train or make stuff up from what you already do.
Or well, or basically get better at what you do.
But is that what a lot of people did?
No.
So I did a
And
little shrug there because people
yeah, no, no,
visually
no.
aren't seeing this.
No, you get into different instructors that may not have had more of a strong will, if you might, or it's kind of hard to explain, but maybe they didn't come across as they were having the student's best interest.
Yeah.
Just looking at it from a money perspective, which that's happened before,
Yeah.
But
we were talking about people who really tried.
Yes.
Because there is very much the money perspective thing of, because I was around a place that in my beginning years where it was just go on the tide and see which one what will bring in the most fish, as it were. But I think there's people who genuinely were in a self crisis on what they were doing, because when things became more available and more accessible, I think you had the people cross training. That's not a bad thing, but yeah, and you can kind of get the wackiness of people combining stuff, which it can be done in a very subtle way, but it can also, there's a lot of people who were we combined this and this to create this, which sometimes works very well. Look at Ishinru. Ishinru literally just went yeah, we do a little bit of Goju-Ryu and we do some Shorin-Ryu and we made up our own kata. Have any problems? Not really.
No.
But then you have people who are we're combining jujitsu and Shorin-Ryu karate and Japanese sword to form the Doshinkai, whatever the hell that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and people who are I have a yellow belt in nunchuck, that fun stuff.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So what I think people who went the other direction was essentially they're kind of navel gazing towards the kata.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because kata's, why are we doing the kata other than competition?
I'm sorry. It drives me absolutely bonkers when somebody says kata is just an exercise.
It is, but
it is, but it's not just. That's the problem. And I think that's what's happened to karate. Sorry, since I'm from Kansas City, you're taking away the meat and potatoes of the meal. All you got left is corn. That's about it.
That's the one vegetable we're gonna go towards. Corn.
And guess what?
Is that why you're apologizing for being from the Midwest?
And guess what? It comes out the same way it goes in. It's just like human Christmas.
Here's the thing. I agree with you that there's a lot of people who were very much on the skirts with kata, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. But I think there was an opposite reaction that made just kata become this magical, mystical thing.
Yeah.
And this is something we can get into because this led to the quote unquote Bunkai Revolution.
Well, yeah. The sad thing is people needed to be taught Bunkai and what kata was really for and how to analyze it. That's the problem. You don't have a lot of people that know how to analyze it properly.
Well, and here's the thing. That's what Bunkai means.
Right.
Bunkai is a noun in the form of you're studying, you're looking at, you're not doing the Bunkai, right? You come up with a technique because the Bunkai was the breaking down of what you studied. And the common English mistranslation is that a Bunkai equals technique.
Yeah, no.
And technique comes out of doing Bunkai.
Yeah, studying.
Right.
Possible breakdown of your kata. And I remember having a conversation with somebody the week or two ago, and explaining to him was no, this is the whole background of kata. This is where it comes from. This is the whole purpose of it. It's not just doing an exercise, and they were
Well,
blown away. And,
well,
and,
yeah,
and it's not just kata. It's a lot of other stuff that's involved with it. I mean, you do have your kata, you do have your weaponry, you do have your basics. All of them tie in. You have bogu kumite, you have practice of technique, you have several different things. I mean, footwork drills, all this other stuff, and it all goes into basically, I mean, the overall study of your techniques in Bonkai is really your overall research of what you're doing. And if you're not doing that, you're not really doing karate.
I'm gonna
Sorry.
come. No. That's a great statement because that you don't need to apologize for that at all. The whole idea here is that when we see people who say that, right, about kata and it's just an exercise, it doesn't have any meaning. We don't ride horses anymore. I don't know, but the reflexiveness to retreat into kata, right? Either as just a static exercise that you do, and that's the only thing that you do, or you're trying to come up with some wacky stuff to follow the ABC pattern of it, right? Which is what a lot of people did for a long, long time.
And still do.
And still do, and there's some of it that's okay, but there's some of it that's just wacky. But then it gets into the over experimentalism, right? So it's like if you punch me this way, if you punch me that way, which is not bad, but it becomes over experimental to the point of impracticality.
I'm going to build off what you just said.
Mm.
I think that's the beginning of it. I think you got to start there. That's not the end goal. You punch, do this. That's the start of being able to really begin to understand what you're researching. But
Go ahead.
it's not the final.
And by no means, dude, this is what you taught me. This is what we studied, right?
Right.
But I'm talking about it kind of in the wrong direction of
Right.
like, and I mean that in the wrong direction of you are over prescribing the technique to the attack rather than the attack comes at you and you're finding out what you can do with it. Which
And
is
I
a big there's a big difference there, right?
and I think that's where a lot of people get. And I mean, I'm not normally, I'm not PC, but I'm not trying to insult anybody with this next statement. Americans are horrible about this stuff. We really
I mean, I
are.
think most people are. I don't think it's
Well,
Americans.
well, no, we kind of cream the crap on this one, but it's
Is that
what
another
what
corn reference?
well, it's one of my references, but anyway, anyway, can use it. I don't care. But anyway, it's what we do. A lot of times, Americans tend to try to put everything into a box and try to memorize everything instead of trying to look at it as a whole. And I think that's one of the big problems we have. And it's hard to get people out of it because I'm going to go back to your modern day education, which I'm not real thrilled with right now from what I'm seeing, but it's like you have to memorize, you have to memorize, you have to memorize. Well, how do you memorize? You memorize by putting things in boxes and organizing how they do instead of looking at how everything's put together. And you run into this when you're doing analysis on your techniques and stuff like that. It's like, well, that's a da 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 da. I'll never forget this one instance. I was teaching someone, and they were mentioning it as in Japanese terminology, and that's great, and that's kind of cool. And then she goes, "Why don't you reference it as Japanese? Why don't you call it by the Japanese name?" I'm like, because I speak English. I need to communicate in English because if I have a student, I'm not bringing somebody over here from Japan to learn from me. I'm, I'm,
And unfortunately Japanese is not like the lingua franca of karate. It really isn't.
yeah,
Because there's too many people who pronounce Japanese stuff in other places in the world where literally like and they just end up translating it into their own language and say it in their own language anyway. So I mean That's a different conversation. That's a
Yeah,
different conversation, and
but
one I've kind of had on here. But anyway, no, you're right in stating that. And it's also that, I mean, the boxes thing. Sorry, I didn't want to
no,
derail
no,
your
no, no,
point.
no. Go ahead.
No, I mean, the boxes thing is like, I mean, I would say I don't think it's just an American thing though. I mean, I've lived in Japan for 7 years, man. The boxes, like if you try to put a attempt to put a square peg in anything, you'll get knocked down. Like there's very much a way you do things and a way you don't do things. There's things that are overprescribed, and I've seen it, like people freak out when the overprescribed thing isn't the way that it's seen, or like the people expect things to be done a certain way. Can you still hear me? And so, I mean, and I think that's everywhere. I don't think that's just here. I don't think that's just the States. um I think there is somewhat of a misconception of people had a real good understanding of how to do this. I think some people did have some people did at certain points, and some people just kind of went along with what was being shown to them. But this goes to kind of circle back to bunkai. Well, we kind of, there's the overprescription issue, right? Like this bunkai is going to be for this X, Y, and Z
yeah,
thing. Then there is, I guess, we can kind of go into taking the blame for some of this.
I mean, here's the thing: you got to start somewhere, but where do you take it?
Right,
Do you say this is only for this, or do you
right.
say, okay, this can be used as this? What else can it be used for? And I think that's a healthier progression on your training as opposed to this is the only thing that this is used for. I think that limits you what you can do, and I think it hurts the ability of your training overall.
That's true. I agree with that. There's one thing that has, this is something I've talked with a couple other people about, whereas when it comes into like where we come from, where it's Tuite and Kyusho and Atemi, and like,
Yeah,
this is where we can get into it, but talking about the magic, because unfortunately this stuff has been seen as magic, because people want to see that as magic, and it's getting confused with, because it gets mixed in with the idea of studying kata,
right.
right? Studying kata, and you're getting the technique from the kata, right?
Hmm.
Now, there was at least not a bad idea, was to kind of put the idea of the technique into kata to kind of see it more blatantly or more clearly. I kind of know what happened there is that people got too obsessed with doing that
Right.
to the point of detriment.
Yes.
And then even more so, they got more obsessed with seeing the magic rather than understanding that it wasn't magic. It literally started a whole cottage industry
Yes.
around TCM and crap like that.
Yes.
And this is where it really becomes like nose candy. Just these unhealthy looking people not training in martial arts,
Yeah.
not being able to hold their own in like 50 push-ups or in a freaking sparring match. But I know, like, I know where the points are, right? We can make fun of those people all day long.
And I don't think we really wanted. We don't even.
No. And that's not the point. Like,
Yeah.
the point is that, like, this is where the issue stems from getting away from those sort of things. And then what are you left with?
Yeah.
Just magic tricks, joint lock techniques to make somebody go down who's going to be compliant half the time?
Yeah.
Knockout techniques that really don't work
Unless they're set up.
most of the time, even by the people who were the best at them, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was some level of setup a lot of times to show it. I mean, if somebody was really good and knew what, I mean, you really know what you're doing. I mean, yeah, you can nail somebody and do that. But, and I've had this conversation with other people from other arts. It's like, oh, it's just wizardry and things like that. And this is kind of what I've always kind of told them. I'm like, it's one of those things that's nice to know, but don't count on it all the time. And that's how I kind of practice. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna stop with, okay, this should have knocked you out. If you do that, you're incomplete on your training. I don't think you're really developing an overall technique, and I don't think you're developing your skills in karate.
And it's the same thing with tuite, and the same thing with the joint manipulation. Like,
Yeah.
the tuite and the joint manipulation will only take you so far. You're gonna get people who can't, who it's not gonna work on. There's again people that won't Like the armbar won't work, or that joint technique won't work, or that kotegaeshi won't work,
Yeah.
or that cross wrist hand grab's not gonna be it. And there's people who are soul training today who can't get out of that because they were taught that that's the only thing, like that's the end all be all. They saw the reaction from people, and it's an easy technique to do. So A, B, C, like they don't have to do anything.
So, I mean, I think that's the fault of the instructor, because the instructor should say, okay, if this doesn't work, what are you moving to? And I think that's what we need to really concentrate on or develop in karate is, what are you moving to? This is not the end all be all of all techniques. It's not. What are you moving to? And that's what's hurt us. That's what's hurt karate. Period.
Yeah, and there's I don't want to say there's no way to fix it, but the people who are supposedly in charge of it, all of it, don't really want to do anything about that, and they don't want to say, we've learned from the past, because they don't want to do anything. They want to sit there and say, we can teach a kata, or we can do a technique, and we can do a seminar. Let's do a seminar, and just that forever and a goddamn day, and there's not a progression, right?
Well,
Like if there's anything we can say about the 75 episodes we've done and the all this stuff we've talked about, right? Is that we want to see go somewhere else than where it's been.
And guess what? I'm probably going to tick off a lot of damn people with this.
But I mean, go ahead.
And you know what? I don't give a shit. And here's the bottom line: people who are running karate organizations need to get off their ass, and they need to start thinking about the future and what they're actually training these people, instead of some glorified BS honorization of whatever certificate, honored belt, or whatever else. Who gives a crap? I'm sorry. And that's what pisses me off more than just about anything else. And that's kind of why I'm kind of on my own. I resigned from the organization I was a part of. It wasn't just that, but it does have to do with people wanting more honorifics or acknowledgement or awards or whatever else, what other crap.
Do that all day long, like when you're drinking at the bar. Like, you know what I mean? There's a place for them.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's great. It's all good. But the issue is that then this is where, this is kind of the macro issue rather than the micro issue where we're kind of getting to. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, honestly, I feel like what the future is going to be more and more is you're going to have these dinosaur organizations that have are densely, it's kind of what Japan's dealing with right now, densely populated with old people, and the younger faces are fewer and fewer and fewer.
And it's already there. It's already there.
I mean, kind of, yeah. And then you're going to have all these other people who are these pockets of little training groups and dojos and and I don't know, guys on the internet or whatever, right? Who are doing their own stuff, but there's almost zero to no community or unity. And that, I mean, to a degree, yes, that's true. That's happened. But I mean, what I feel is so much more important is to just invest within that communities that you have and try to grow those. And it's hard, but that's where you gotta go to. And there's people who are doing it. And there's people we've had on who do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I believe they recognize what we're saying. And I hope to God I get to get on the floor with a couple of them again sooner than later. I want to bring it back, if I can. I want to bring it back to this. Yeah. And it's the misunderstanding of the word technique, because it's waza, right, in Japanese. And it's the misunderstanding is how we think about technique. So when we think about technique, it's not wrong to think about technique in terms of you throw a punch, I do an armbar, or you throw a punch, block check counter or something, right? Something along those lines. But when we talk about technique in kind of another way of thinking it, which I think goes exactly into what we were just saying, is how you go about training. It's literally how you carry yourself within your own training. And I know that sounds like kind of large and mystical, but if I can like roll it back to like, the reason why there's so many different dojos, the reason why there's so many different styles, is it's the style of training that you do, the way that you're doing it. It's not just a it depends situation. It's the way that you're doing. It's the way that it's coming out. It's the way that you're bleeding people. It's the way that you're showing them the technique. You're showing them with intent. You're showing them with being able to go directly into something rather than like A, B, C, right? And that shows those people how to develop their style, develop themselves, right? Technique in that regard, not just a technique here and a technique there, but technique, in and of itself. So, and I think that's where, I think people should develop that. And but I think they need to be a lot smarter about it than what we've been seeing last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of good intention in the beginning, but I think now it's knowing how to have all these good things that we have and knowing how to balance them and balance training. So I don't blame anybody for it.
Yeah.
But in order to kind of fix an issue, you need to recognize it.
Agreed. So, sorry, I don't have more than that.
No. I mean, that's the kind of. I didn't mean to do a monologue there, but it's something I don't think we really talked about, and it's something like. It's one of those things you always kind of forget. You come across like, hey, that's right, and then you just kind of forget about it, right? And that kind of happened a couple of times, and I'm like, I wanted to kind of get that one out, and hopefully, put that more into kind of how we approach them. Anything you wanna cap off on here?
No, I guess the thing of it is glitter's entertaining and it's nice and bright and shiny, but sometimes the pounding the old stone is the main thing that gets you through the day. So
it's no meat and potatoes, not even corn.
No, not
Can't
even
eat glitter.
Yeah, don't tell that to my dog. Anyway.
All right.
So,
very cool. Very cool.
Anyway,
Jeremy, what's on the what are you do? You're letting your dog eat glitter?
No, she got into my daughter's stuff. Was it one Christmas, and next thing you know, she's out in the yard and you see something shiny, and you're like, "What the heck is that?" And sure enough, she left some shiny poo. So anyway, so it was
delicious,
entertaining.
Delicious.
So anyway.
All right, cool. That's a way to end off that shiny poo.
Shiny poo.
No, that's a good way to put it. It's all shiny poop in the end, right? We had an arc. We gave it an arc. Jeremy, that's awesome. All right, cool. Jeremy, what are you doing this week in terms of training? Or what do you got going?
I got going back on. Like I said, kids are sick right now, so I'm getting back to just a lot of basics. I'm trying to get my son over being sick and then starting to show him more along the lines of being intentional, getting grounded in, solid fundamentals and stuff. And so it's, taking what he's learning and starting to do that as well. So
got an empty bag. I have a bag of sand. I've got plenty of like stuffing and stuff, like futons and stuff, like I can kind of put around it. So this week I don't know if I'm going to really be able to do it because I got a 65-hour week ahead of me. But my like every day, 10-minute a day type of goal is figure out how to get that done and set up a bag. Or just like spend $100 and get a standing bag.
I got you. Understand. Cool.
Do it cheaply or do it cheaply.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Anything you want to say in closing? Today's episode.
I mean, I guess the thing of it is, no matter who's teaching, you can always learn something from them. It's just how you apply it to what your training needs are. So, I mean, good or bad, sometimes both are good lessons. So, just take it as it comes. So
Cool. Wise words to live by. Wise words to live by. All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. This episode's been a blast. And yeah, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for everything. And yeah, keep on training, everybody.